I will start by asking you a question. So this is going to be about how can we detect corruption in order to try to fight it. But if you want to fight corruption, if you want to understand corruption, you have to think like a corrupt company or a corrupt government, right? If you want to catch a thief, think like a thief. So I'm going to ask you, how would you try to be corrupt if you were the public procurer or the firm? How would you do it?
Military power.
No, corruption in public procurement, right? How would you do it? So you have this auction, and you're going to try to be corrupt. I'm going to try to do favoritism. So imagine I am the government, and you are my favorite company, and you want to deliver to me. How are we going to do it? Because there's an auction. How do you do it?
We need to find we need to find intermediary.
Need to find what?
Someone who will be doing deals instead of us. Something intermediary unit.
Some intermediary? Who needs to do that? The government or the firm? But and this intermediary will do the auction, right? Or how can you make sure that you're actually going to win the auction? It's not so. Corruption is hard, eh? Corruption is hard. Yes.
I will say that for my logistics.
Oh wait! I have to follow the mic, guys. Sorry, I'm saying this and this, but I have to be more disciplined. I will be more. And you decide on the mic. I will not do this. You decide on the mic, and okay. Because then
I will say that I need for my logistic project the firm with cooker in a council with cooker diploma. I will specify too narrowly that no one else will be able to.
Narrow qualification rules.
Yes.
That's something that works. For example, imagine we have to hire someone for tenure track by public procurement, and I want that I'm the one who is hired. I would say we need a professor in economics who speaks Russian, works on public procurement in Russia, on complexity, is tall, is very beautiful. Okay, maybe not that. And so you make a number of qualification rules that are so specific. There's only one candidate. That's a typical way of doing it. You would be good in corruption, yes. It's not an advice or not a career plan, but it's an observation. Is there anyone else?
Narrow demands for procurement. Then you need such a product that those demands are only such specifications that can be good only for one company. It is, I think, it's more wide than the previous.
Well, it's more or less the same, but so it's a demand on the product itself, right? But
yes.
But it's also a kind of qualification rule. Huh? So limits on who can apply. Yes. Who else? Anna.
Guessing from the title of your paper, you're going to set the price so low then have the kickbacks or run over costs, so nobody else but your chosen one will be able to win it.
A low price. Why would you set a low price? Because how will you be able to finance the kickback?
Maybe it's a signal of better.
You're right, but why? Because I mean, you're just cheating, right? You see the title, so so okay, why? Not cheating, but okay, why would you manipulate the price? What would it give you?
If I give a suggestion, you have to think about what is the rule of the auction. So accordingly to the rule, you can design a strategy which allow you to collude, so to reach some corruptive results.
So you're saying it's conditional on the rules of the auction?
Yes, because for instance, if you have average auction, the average price auction,
yes.
The collusion is just to make an agreement with other bidders to put the price in a certain area of the distribution. While if you have first price auction, the collusion is not the rule with collude is not to go below a certain price with all the participants.
So Paula is making a very important general point. There's a difference between corruption and collusion. how do you write this? One L, two L's? Two L's, right? Collusion. No, it sounds wrong, but okay. Okay, so corruption is about a vertical link between the procurer and one favorite company. Collusion is about we together as firms are gonna play a trick that makes both of us happy. For example, by coordinating on the price conditional on the auction rules. So one typical thing that happens in terms of collusion is shadow bidding. So I'm the favorite. Everybody knows I'm the favorite, but I cannot be the only one in the auction. So I have a firm, a shadow firm, that always is bidding and they are always losing. And they're just a pretext. They're the pretext. So I have a very high price, but they have even a higher price, right? And so I will get the thing with the shadow bidder. That's collusion. Another one is alternate bidding. Alternate bidding is, okay, I win, you win, I win, you win, I win, you win, and we agree. So we know we are the 2 or 3 big firms in this market. We are bidding on this product, and we agree beforehand. This time you win, this time you win, this time you win. There was a huge case on alternate bidding in lifts, elevators in Europe. The 4 biggest companies had been dividing the whole European market of procurement for almost a decade. They were discovered, so they were, for every little procurement, they were deciding who would win, and they would set all the prices they would bid. And there was a fine of 4 billion or something euros to these guys. So it does not only happen in Russia, right? Corruption per procurement is a problem. There's a lot of money there. Okay.
My public procurement will be in the period of winter holidays.
So
yes,
basically,
because there are 2 weeks, and
basically you're creating a system where nobody comes.
Yes.
So restrict applications somehow. How else could you restrict applications? So by looking at the period, restrict applications. What else could you do? Well, my writing is a bit erratic, I'm sorry for that, unreadable.
And I could give some so complicated instructions without explanation, and only my political connected firm will know what I really need to buy.
So one thing is lack of transparency, make it really complex. So you have a procurement and you have like 50,000 pages with rules you have to comply with, and so whatever. The transaction cost is so high, it's prohibitively high, I will not even bother to apply. But this is very visible, right? Are there more sophisticated ways to restricting entry? So one way is, if I want you to win, the simplest way is making sure no one else comes. How can I do this? How can I make sure no one else comes? So imagine I want to be hired for the job, and I want no one else to. So my strategy is not I will meet a professor which is tall and speaks Russian and blah blah blah. My strategy is going to be I make sure nobody else applies for the job. How do you do that?
Maybe a really high penalties if I don't do everything as rules.
Yes,
You can send some signal that you are something exceptional.
yes.
You've probably heard about this, but I've heard of some public procurement procedures in Russia where they basically, in the title of the bid, they replaced all the Cyrillic Cs with Latin Cs.
Yes.
It's impossible to discover, right?
Yes.
So that the search doesn't show anything.
Yes. So basically, make sure the information seems to be there, but it's not accessible for anyone except the guy you want. One practical way of doing this is, so for example, people would search for, you have this big data set for top liver. But in the word top liver, one of the O's is replaced by a 0. It looks the same, but at the moment you do the search, you're not going to find it. But of course, you make sure that your favorite gets it. It's a very sophisticated way. Almost, and you say, oh, it was a mistake, sorry. So basically it's about the so what you could also do is advertise it in a very murky journal. So imagine I want to be the one that is selected for the job. I will say, okay, the application and the information about the application, you put it in the insignificant journal of unknown things somewhere. and you send it to me. So you make the application period very short. You say, okay, you publish it on a website, say, okay, we have this great tenure track job, everybody can apply, application, okay, it was yesterday. Basically, so, I mean, I'm exaggerating, but application periods, play with application periods. Make it so short, nobody can do it. But of course, your favorite knows it already for a month. He got it from you. So these are all tricks that you can do to play with procurement. So that's what we're going to talk about. So let's see how far you got. We talked about this, right? You could try to play around with the contract phase. You could say special clauses on the product. We talked about this. You talked about it, and you talked about special clauses. Some special clauses on the product. Make it a very, very, very detailed requirements. You could have the accessibility of publication. This happened a lot in Russia before you had the law on e-auctions, actually, and the law on everything should be on the website. But if the procurement is in some murky journal, you know, application periods. Make them very short. Make sure the publication comes out on Monday and you have to apply on Saturday, basically the Saturday before. In the application phase, some special qualification rules. Paula was talking about certification. So basically, what, for example, happens in infrastructure, building bonds. So if you apply for a big infrastructure project, you need to have a building bond. And a building bond is a bank that will guarantee that they will support you financially. You will not go bankrupt, basically, essentially. But you could say you need a building bond from this particular bank, and this bank will only support the favorite. Or you could, I could say, for the tenure track, we need a professor that speaks Russian, and his quality of Russian has to be certified by Marie Yutkevich. So, tomorrow. So I will be the only one who gets it, you see? So you can play with these rules to make sure you're the only candidate. And people are very sophisticated about that. You have set-out procedures. So a set-out procedure is usually for some public goal. So you could say, okay, we do all this stuff, but at least 30% of all the money spent on this thing should go to small companies. Or should go to professors that speak Russian or all. So you can use the set-out criteria to make sure your favorite is at least part of the winning guys. Usually this is meant to fulfill some social requirements or environmental requirements, but you could use it for favoritism. It's a handle you could use. You could exclude firms between application and auction phase. So firms apply, they knew about it, they found out, and then you say, I'm so sorry, this comma is wrong, you cannot bid. So people submit papers, and you always can find reasons if you make it complex enough. That say, oh, there's a little mistake here, I'm sorry, yes. Yeah, the certification, it's the right certification, but it had to be by midnight yesterday. It's 5 minutes late, I'm sorry. You can't, so you can play with this kind of stuff. That's easy to do. What else can you do? In the actual auction, I mean, the simplest thing you didn't point out. In sealed bid auctions, what actually happens a lot, a sealed bid auction is people make their bids, you don't know the other bids, it's not sequential, so you all submit your bids, and then they all are an envelope, and you open the envelope, and the one with the best price usually wins. If I have a favorite, what I do, I open the envelope earlier, I say, oh, Nargiza, the best price is this, could you just give me a price €1 ruble less? You give me the price, that's it. It's the simplest way. It's a bit crude, but if it's not detected, it's very effective. You will always win. Just open the envelope. So this you can actually prevent by e-auctions. Right? If you do e-auctions, what is an e-auction? It's a bidding on a platform. It's sequential. You see all the bids of the competitors. There's no envelope you can open, there's no secret information. So that trick you cannot do. In the actual auction, it's hard to do real corruption. This is the only way. That's why you have e-auctions. E-auctions can really stop corruption in a narrow sense, but they cannot stop collusion. You have the alternate bidding, you have the shadow bidding, you have the price coordination. Sometimes you have hidden signals in the price. So you could agree with two companies that you always bid on the same things and you know who is going to win. But of course, if it's on an e-auction And it's sequential. You still, I mean, it's hard to coordinate. So what you could do, you could say, okay, my price will always be 0.97 in decimals. So I will bid 100.97. I know the 97. That's this firm. So if you agreed you would win, you have to go below it. If this time you're the loser, you have to go above it. And so the bids are even if the bids are anonymous, you could create signals that nobody knows. Or you could say, I alternate. So I do 97.79, 97.79, and you know these two numbers, that's this firm. These are simple ways, even in e-auctions, to collude. You have the bid evaluation phase. So once you have all the bids and it's all there, you can do scoring rules. So usually it's the price, but you could do scoring rules. So the scoring rule could be, okay, 20% price and 80% on height. So that increase my possibilities. And maybe another, so maybe 20% price, 70% on height, and 10% on having blue eyes, you know? So you could have some exotic norms in the evaluation to make sure. So the special clauses you could do in the beginning, but you could also do special clauses here. By having an evaluation criterion in the scoring rule that it's not price, but quality, but how you define quality. And there you can really get a favorite. And then, of course, you have the ex post renegotiation stuff. That's something you can easily do. You could, so one strategy is, I bid a very low, so we agree, just bid a very low price. You could say, okay, I know the marginal cost of all these guys. Nobody's going to bid less than this. So, Nargisa, you bid just less than, you'll win. And then you do whatever. You do cost overrun, time overrun, you do, oh, there's some additional costs here, and you just charge me, I will pay for all of that. You just renegotiate the contract ex post. And we know this beforehand. That's also a way of being corrupt, right? And that happens, of course, a lot. It's not always corruption. Sometimes it's just incompetence, but often it's also corruption. It's an understanding. I will bid a very low price, but we all know the actual price is going to be higher. And that's our secret agreement. So, many ways to be corrupt. This is not I'm not trying to inspire you.
Instructions for corruption.
If I'm inspiring you, I'm trying to say, if you're ever in a government position, this is the things you have to think about. This is what you have to fight. You have to fight creativity from these guys. They're very creative. Whatever you do, they will come up with something new that try to circumvent your policy. What we will talk about is the reserve price. And that's one of these very smart strategies. Basically, what is the reserve price? It's like in labor markets, the reservation wage. Huh? I don't know why they call the reserve price not the reservation price, but that's the name people use. And the reserve price is the maximum amount some procurer, some government is wanting to pay for this contract. For example, I'm going to hire facilities for summer schools, and the maximum amount I'm willing to pay, and I put that in the contract phase, is X rubles. So it's a ceiling. And then the question is, what would work? If you set a very high reserve price, it means you can get a higher price, but you will also get more competition. So you'll have to find a way to stop competition. If you set a very low reserve price, it will limit competition, but it could increase the probability of winning. So actually you could use both strategies. This paper will be about very high reserve prices. We're working on another paper with a model on very low reserve price, and it also works. So you can play with the reserve price as a couple of procurer and supplier to manipulate these auctions. So these are all the phases. We talked about these phases, and you can be corrupt in any one of them. Okay, what does the literature say? Is there some literature on corruption? Sure. In fact, I'm going to mainly talk about this paper because this paper is about Russia. If you haven't read it, it's really cool read. It's a paper of Mironov and Juravskaya. What they do is the following. They have data of all firm payments, firm to firm, for a certain period of time. So this is a really big data set. Millions, actually billions of payments. What they do is they look at what they call tunneling. Some firms are so-called fly-by-night firms. These are firms that exist, but they don't live very long, and they never pay taxes. So they are firms that are created for a purpose and then disappear again. Fly-by-night firms. What they do is they do the following. They say, can we find payments from normal firms to fly-by-night firms? Because this is money that is, and the money then returns to the firm. But it's, so how can you create money for bribes? Because it's going to be, I mean, all your money is official, it's in the accounting. What you do is you pay some fly-by-night firm for some consultancy. It's a firm and it disappears. The money goes to the firm, and the firm will give you the money back after having a fatty fee, and then that money you can use for corruption. So they show that there is a correlation in Russia between payments for fly-by-night firms just before elections and having more success in public procurement after the elections. So what is going on in their story is you create some взятки through the fly-by-night strategy, you pay some politicians, you help them, and the reward is you get more public procurement spend. That's their story. And they're very consensus about making it very robust. It's a really nice paper. One of the examples they have in their paper is Inteco, which is the company of the wife of the former mayor of Moscow, Ryzhkov. So Ryzhkov was the mayor, his wife was Baturina, he had the firm Inteco. And what you see is just before the election, Inteco has a massive spike in payments to fly-by-night firms. And after the election, a massive spike in one per procurement, and you have it in 2 elections. This is kind of the anecdotal evidence that we need for the other paper, right? There you have the evidence of Inteco. There is also a paper of comparing public infrastructure costs with the value of public infrastructure and showing there's a huge gap there, and clearly due to corruption. There's also some papers on implications of corruption. So actually there are not so many papers because of course corruption is, that's the problem. The nature of corruption is it's unobservable. So it's very rare you find someone red-handed. You can only show patterns that are in line with corruption and in line with nothing else. Then you can say, look, this is most likely corruption because it's not in line with any other theory, only the corruption theory. But you can never actually prove it. So also in this paper, it's well published, but you can never actually prove it. You can only show, look, the only reasonable explanation is corruption. Okay? So, but what are the implications? You get less competition, you get welfare losses, governments end up paying more. So you get inflated contract prices. But that's pretty much it. What do governments do, typically? As I told, the most simple way is opening the envelope. The most simple way to fight it is having e-auctions, electronic auctions. It's transparent, it's sequential, you see all the bids, there's a certain period you can bid, and you create real competition. It's supposed to be a low entry cost, right? Because it's online, it's not so difficult to do. There's a few papers on that, and they are not consistent. There's one paper of Lewis and Foppel. They say there's no price decrease, but there's quality improvement. So e-auctions are good because you get better quality in the end. Then you have a paper of Athy, Susan Athy, who is the big lady of machine learning and economics. I think she works at Microsoft. And she says, okay, there are price reductions. So the evidence is not completely conclusive, and there's still a lot of discussion about this in the literature. Okay? So what is the purpose of this paper? The first thing is, actually, so this is also a paper that started on the summer school, together with Liana Podkolzina and Sumera, who is one of the students. So you see, it can happen, it can work. Believe in your own papers, work at your papers. So you try to detect corruption. Why? We're going to look at reserve price manipulation. And then we're going to try to see whether the corrupt consequence of reserve price manipulation are reduced by e-auctions, whether the e-auctions work to reduce it. So let me say a few words about the legal environment in Russia. They have a unified procurement system. Everybody has the same rules in every region, in every city. It's true at the federal, provincial, and municipal level, so it's for all levels of government. They have the same system, which is nice. And in 2014, actually, there was a new law that replaced the old law. But we're going to work at the the 2011 system and the 2011 system, I'm sorry. So what they did, they created a centralized online platform. And all the auctions are on these centralized online platforms. There are a few of these platforms. And they introduced mandatory e-auctions. So of course, the law is very big. There's many things you can say about it. But the crucial thing for us is they introduced mandatory e-auctions. From the moment on, the contract value, the reserve price, is high enough, more than 500,000 rubles, then it will be an e-auction. Actually, there's two rules. It's also the case that even if, so what would be the logical way of circumventing it? Okay, if the rule is I need an e-auction from 500,000, I will have two auctions of 250,000, you know? And that's it, no e-auction. I can do sealed bid, I can be corrupt. So they also said, if within the same quarter, the sum of all your public procurements is more than 500,000, you also have to do e-auctions. So they're trying to be smart and trying to anticipate the logical way of circumventing the first rule by also adding a rule on the time, which is a good idea. Okay, I'm going to put this here. All right, so what do we have? Since all these things are online, not in a very nice form though. Some are PDF, some are Word files, some are Excel files, some are in another format, and so you have to scrape it online, and it's a mess. So it's not a ready and easy to use data set. It's a data set that requires effort and sweat, and we're thankful for someone doing all the effort and the sweat. What is the system? It's no scoring rule, so you cannot use that for corruption. It's just a price. The reserve price is published. What we're going to do is we're going to use a homogeneous good. Because if you're going to judge on the price, of course there could be quality differences you can't observe. But let's take gasoline. I mean, it's very homogeneous. In fact, in Russia, with Russian data, there are two goods that are very widely studied: sugar and gasoline, and the reason is homogeneity. There can be quality difference, but not many actually. And we also want to purchase this through gas stations. Why? The reason is that increases the homogeneity. You could still say, if I get a public contract for gasoline, I could deliver gasoline of worse quality. I just make it lower octane, or I add some water or something, if that's even possible. I mean, you make it lower quality. But the requirement is you have to sell it through gas stations that also supply the private sector. So if you lower the quality, all your private clients also have lower quality. So lowering the quality is not an option, not really an option. That's why we do that. There's no outsourcing. And so we limit all the outsourcing guys. So you cannot win the contract and let someone else do it. You have to do it yourself. So it's a limited sample. We have it in all Russian regions for the period 2011-2013, meaning the e-auction period, basically. And of course, we have to control for monthly regional prices. And we have that from Rostad. They differ a lot. Actually, what I mention now, what I see now is that I have no legend here. So that's an example of how you should not do it. If you show a figure, show a legend. Now look, I can only say the prices differ, but there are some regions with lower prices, some with higher prices, but with this figure won't tell you because there's no legend. So that's a bad example. Okay, so there's also information on the reserve price. We have information on the level, and we have information on the rationale. So the firms have to explain why they set the reserve price the way they set it. And they can refer to official statistics of the government. They can refer to websites. They can refer to market research websites. But they can also refer to price quotations. They can say, we ask the price for 3 or 4 firms, and we take the average, or we take the largest, or we take the smallest. They have to motivate it. Yeah? So you have information on how they motivate the reserve price. And governments have complete discretion on the reserve price. They can set it the way they want it, and they can motivate the way they want it. That's an interesting source of variation we're going to use here. Okay? And in fact, it matters. So we have anecdotal evidence that officials are taking to court if they fail to comply to the rule. So people are serious about trying, so the information is reliable in that sense. What you see is that this is the information we get. So actually, it's still pretty incomplete, but for sealed bid auctions, you have it in the tender notice and documentation. For electronic auctions, you may have it in documentation. So we're going to use mainly the documentation that you get with these auctions. Okay, this is just like summary stats. Most of the, so these are all the 81,000 bids. What is going on? Do people refer to market research or to government websites? No, mostly they refer to price quotations. So most of the public procurement auctions, the government is not referring to a government website or to a market research website. They're referring to, I asked prices to this and this and this firm, and this is the average price or the highest price. So they use price quotations. So there's a lot of discretion on, I mean, if you want a high price, you just ask 3 firms, give me a high price, and you get a high price. There's discretion in setting the reserve price. This is going to be the idea. It's a very simple idea. Here, R is the reserve price, and a reserve price is always between a couple. We know who eventually wins. So imagine this is the reserve price of Procurer 1 with all its sellers. In this example, we have 2 sellers. And so over time, you see all the bids, you observe all the final winners, you observe the reserve prices, so you know per couple of government procurer and firm seller what the reserve prices were. And you know the average reserve price for a procurer. You could say some procurers are inefficient or they're different in some way, but it's within the same procurer, the different sellers. And then we're going to look whether, okay, are there some couples that are systematically having higher reserve prices than other couples within the same procurer. Which is interesting because at the moment you set the reserve price, you don't know the winner. You don't know the winner. You set the reserve price, then you have the auction. And then ex post, we look at the winning guys, there should be no correlation. Nothing should be significant. Well, statistically there's always going to be something, so just by luck you should have a few. But this should never be really big. So this is the idea. We're going to look at couples of reserve prices. No, we look at reserve prices of couples, actually. So how do you do this methodologically? I show it by a figure, but what do we actually do? What you're going to do is you're going to estimate the reserve price of procurer I to seller J at time T on the number of fundamentals, on some year fixed effects, and on some pair fixed effects. You're going to have pair fixed effects, right? And imagine I'm a procurer, and I have been buying from you and you and you and you and you. Then I have all my pair fixed effects on the reserve price with all of you guys. So my procurer fixed effect is going to be the sum of these pair fixed effects, right? So my mu I, my procurer fixed effects, the reserve price I set on average, basically, is going to be the weighted average of these. I mean, I have 10 with you, 5 with you, I take a weighted average, that's my individual procurer fixed effects. And then I'm going to see, I'm just going to run a test, whether my R fixed effect is different from my average fixed effect. And that's very peculiar. That should never happen. Because I'm the same procurer, it's the same very homogeneous goods, and at the moment I set the reserve price, I don't know that you will win. So there should be no relation. If there is a relation, something is being manipulated. So that's what we do, and basically that's what I said, right? We're going to make a test on this. And this we call, that's our corruption indicator. This is something fishy. And then we're going to see whether for these guys that hit on that variable, we see special patterns that are illogical and are in line with corruption. So this is the regression I described. The only thing you see here is, why do I show this? I show you the variables, the control variables. That's it. So we run the reserve price on the market price per liter, on the volume. So if the local market price is higher, it's going to be higher. If the volume is higher, there's going to be an effect. It differs by government level. And you have the year fixed effects, and you have the procurer seller fixed effects. A simple regression. Very simple. And then we do these tests, and this is what you find. So we have in this sample, we have 10,971 pairs. Of these, 1,257 are overpricing. We call it overpricing. That's 11.5%. While if you do the simulations, you can do this simple simulation of what you get by luck. You get more or less 1%. It's far too much. If you look at the procurers, it's 19% of the procurers. So that means that the same procurers show up in several corrupt couples. That's what it means. And the same for sellers, 21%. So it's also the same sellers showing up with more procurers. It's not one corrupt procurer that actually has many sellers. There's also the same seller that has many corrupt procurers. So you have corrupt players here, on both sides of the market. If you look at how many of the auctions have this kind of strange pattern, it's 18%. So it's a big number. It should be 1 or 2%. It's 18%. So it's far away from what you would expect purely statistically. So okay, this is just an observation. Like, whoa, this is a strange pattern. Now the question is going to be, can we link this to something that is in line with corruption, right? So what are we going to do? So first of all, we have here a case of unexpectedly high reserve prices. That should mean more bidders come to the auction, right? So you have this thing, and they say the contract price is really high. Wow! It should attract more competitors. If competition is lower for these guys, that would be very strange. If you have less competition with exceptionally high prices, it's like the opposite of what you'd expect. It can only be corruption. Second, you should also have that sellers that are a corrupt pair are more likely to win auctions of the procurer they're corrupted. So if you take a sample with all the guys bidding and only the guys that ever won, so you take all the winners in elections, you should see that I'm much more likely to win if I do an auction with my corrupt pair than in other auctions. Get this parables. Well, that should normally not be the case. So you should see like the thing. And you should also see that it increases the final price. These are things that would be in. So normally if it increases competition, it could still be the same price effect. So if you have a high reserve price to attract more competition, there should be no effect on the final price. If it's corrupt, I should see higher price. That is going to finance the corruption fee. All right? So that's what we will do now. So we look at competition. How can we look at competition? Okay, you've heard from Paola and from me how this public procurement works. You have an application phase. Some people are then ruled out. And then you have a final number of bidders. So people come to apply to the auction. Some are excluded. And some people actually bid. So then even coming to the auction, it depends on how many potential people come. In some regions there are many suppliers, in some regions there are few suppliers. So what we do is we look at the auctions in that region in that time, and we look across the board how many players usually come in that environment. That we call the number of potential bidders. And so this first variable is going to be the number of people that actually apply for this auction relative to the potential number of bidders in that environment. So it's going to be about, do they self-select away from application? Do people know this is a corrupt couple and they don't even bother to apply? Or is it about excluding firms? Is it about number of allowed firms divided by number of applying firms? So this variable is about excluding firms. Firms applied but are not allowed on some technicality, right? That's what we're going to do. Okay. Now there are some problems with this. And this is where microeconometrics becomes interesting. Let me explain the problems one by one. The first thing is, e-auctions are to some extent endogenous and to some extent not. So you have this hurdle of 500,000. But some of the electronic auctions, electronic procurements are mandatory, you have to do it. Some are by choice. some people, some procurers choose to do electronic auctions even if they don't have to. If you want to look at the effects of electronic auctions on fighting corruption, we should not look at the choice guys, because if you choose voluntarily to do an e-auction, you're probably not going to be corrupt, and then everything is going to be endogenous. The effect can only be seen from the mandatory ones. So these guys that choose an electronic auction by choice, we're going to eliminate from the sample. These are important things if you really want to think about identification. Yeah. So that's an important. So this is what we have. We thought we had. We actually have this. So we get them out and we move to this. Yeah. So we lose first. Now this is also interesting. Do people care about electronic auctions? This is just a histogram of all the bids we have on the reserve price. Let's say firms in general find it interesting to be just below the reserve price, just below the hurdle of electronic auctions. So this is the electronic auction hurdle. And there's massive sorting just behind the threshold. They don't want to be there. So what we're going to have to do is control for the guys just below the thresholds. Because the sealed bid is also endogenous. It's a choice to have a sealed bid by doing just too low, right? So that's something else we're going to do. We control for it and we also exclude them. You have this donut regressions now where you exclude the things around the sorting and it's the same result. And what do you find? We have a whole load of controls, and I'm not going to show all that. You have year fixed effects, region fixed effects. So you try to be very conscientious about what the things you want to control for. And you see indeed that the overpricing pairs, the corrupt pairs, so to say, they have less people applying to the auction, which is very odd, because there should be more people applying to this auction. It's peculiar. It's not about excluding people. So I had here, one of the things was you exclude some guys based on some technicalities. That's not going on. The final number of bidders is lower, mainly because less people come. So somehow in Russia, everybody knows who are the corrupt couples. And you know, if there's an auction, the corrupt couple is going to be there. I'm not even going to bother to apply, because otherwise they will exclude me anyhow. So there's some selection going on. And the other way, very interesting contracts, people select away from them because they probably expect not to win anyhow. Is there an effect on winning auctions? So what do we do, of course? We only regress this on people that actually win auctions. So, but for every auction you also have all the other ones who competed. And you have the corrupt couples, but you also have them in auctions with non-corrupt governments. And so what we simply are saying, if I, who tend to be corrupt with you sometimes, am much more likely to win auctions with you, tend to win auctions with you because we are not a corrupt couple. And that's very strongly true. These guys are much more likely to win auctions with their corrupt partners, which is very interesting. And we control for a whole number of things. I'm not going to show you all the controls again, because this is what we want to concentrate on. That's also something I advise in academic presentations. Do not do the stuff I did in the first presentation. That's nice to see the difference. Show the main results. So in the presentation I had a slide full of data. Now I want you to look at this. And the controls you can see in the paper, right? If you have 15,000 numbers, nobody will see it. And if you do it, use colors and use bars and make it very clear. Okay. Then we're going to look at the contract price, the effect on the contract price. So you can do a regression. This is the final price. So there's an auction, there's a final price. And you can regress it on these overpricing pairs, the corrupt pairs, the form of the auction, e-auction or not, the number of bidders, and all the interactions. The question is going to be, is the effect of overpricing, being a corrupt couple, on the final price, is that effect going to be diminished if you have an e-auction? And is it going to be diminished if you have more bidders? Because if somehow more bidders come anyhow, it should decrease the price, right? And what you can then, you have this regression. I'm not going to show the regression, but you can calculate the partial effect. So what you have here, this is the partial effect of overpricing on the final price. So after the auction, there's a price. Well, if you have the regression, you can calculate from your coefficients the partial effect of these corrupt couples on the final price. And you see it's positive. But if the number of bidders go up, it's reversed. So the effect of corruption on the final price can be fought by getting more competition. What are the two lines? This line, you could call it the tiny line. That's something that goes wrong with LaTeX presentations. Use more color, use more dots. Huh? I did this on purpose because you see many of these presentations say, there's two lines, but they look the same. They look a little bit different, but so be more clear. Do diamonds here, the circles there. So do not sacrifice too much of your sexy figures for the signal of I'm like a decent guy. Huh? At least show some color. But so I can tell you, this is the e-auctions. These are the sealed bid auctions. So for e-auctions, actually, it's a very big effect. Look at here, it's an effect of 3%. That's a big effect. If there's only one bidder, why is that the case? There's a special rule. If there's only one bidder in an e-auction, it's possible to just get the reserve price. So in e-auctions, the rule is, if nobody else comes except you, we get it at the reserve price. And I just told you the reserve price is exceptionally high. And that's exactly what you see. So if you manage to have, although the reserve price is so high, if you manage to restrict competition completely, it's really valuable. I mean, 3% is big. I mean, these are big contracts. And I mean, the price of oil, it's a very standard price. So it's just a big margin. But then it goes down very steeply. So e-auctions are good. Because if you manage to get the competition, prices go down. However, you have to understand that most of the auctions have one of two bidders. The median is 2. There's a big effect here, but there's very few auctions there. So this is a big effect, but it doesn't actually happen that often that you have it in Russia. So that's the challenge here. For sealed bids, no matter how many bidders you have, you cannot, I mean 6 really doesn't happen at all almost. So for sealed bids, the effect is always positive. No matter how many bidders you have. If you have the corrupt reserve price strategy and sealed bids, it's gonna be bad. You're gonna have to pay too much, which is kind of nice. This is some idea of the welfare cost in terms of markup. So this is the overpricing of the corrupt pairs in terms of the markup and percentages. And you see, well, it doesn't look very big, but you have to remember, these are huge contracts running all the time. So this is a lot of money. Okay. 10 minutes including questions? No, okay, good. Because then I will talk also a little bit about application period stuff we are doing. Okay, so this is the kind of the conclusion here. There is clearly manipulation of reserve prices. What you see is that these corrupt guys are going to face less competition, although they should face more if the price is higher. And they are more likely to win the auctions, although they should be less likely to win the auction because there should be more competition. And you see the result in the final price. The final price is higher, so it's a strategy that seems to work. It's a corrupt strategy that seems to work. You can counter it by e-auctions to some extent if you get enough competition. That doesn't always work, but that's the only way to apparently to fight it. Which brings us to a second thing. What about application periods? So I told you one simple way of being corrupt is saying, okay, everybody can apply and the application date is yesterday. Does that happen in Russia? That's something that's a work in progress. It's very premature, it's very unfinished. So, but I still want to share it, to show you ongoing research, basically. So why should it matter? In the end, it's about entry costs, right? If the application period is very short, it basically increases the entry cost. It's becoming impossible or really hard. I mean, you have to do all this stuff in very short time. So that should limit competition. And that should affect final prices and the final contract. So that's where application periods could work. They change the entry cost. And so if you create a barrier, it's a good way of being corrupt. There are some papers on anti-barriers. There is some stuff on abuse of regulation. I'm not going to talk about this because I have by now 7 minutes left and I want to show you the preliminary results. But you have the stuff, you can look it up, you can read it for yourself. Why is Russia interesting? Well, there are some articles in this law that talk about application periods. For small contracts, actually, and for sealed bid auctions, the rule is if the contract is really small, less than 250,000 rubles, it's going to be more than 4 working days. So they say the period should be at least 4 working days, which is very small, actually. If the contract is a bit higher, it should be more than 7 working days. So between 4 and 7, there is some gaming there, right? Also, and that's the second rule we're going to use, if only one person shows up at the auction, the implication is you're going to have to extend the application period by 4 days. So there's a trick. If you make the application period too short, but only one guy comes, you have to add 4 days. So you have to make sure a second guy comes. Okay? That's really important. The same actually is true for e-auctions, but there the numbers are much higher. E-auctions, 4 days excluded, at least 7 days for small contracts, big small contracts. And for really big contracts, it should be at least 20 days. So you have these rules in Russia, and they are smart rules. There are rules in the anticipation that people will try to be corrupt, and you try to fight it by having these rules. That's the point. So the Russian government was thinking like you were thinking, what would corrupt people do, and try to anticipate by having these rules. That's what we do. Aha. So this is the application period by auction procedure, and you see that there are some interesting patterns, right? For e-auctions, it's at least 7 always, minimum is 7, and this is the distribution. And for sealed bid auctions, it's at least 4, but then, of course, if the contract is high enough, it should be 7. So there's some discontinuity here, of course. Some sorting is going on again. This is kind of interesting. This is the reserve price, the 250,000, and this is the application period. And you see exactly at the hurdle, as you would expect, that application periods go up, right? That's basically the rule is being observed. Yeah? Well, for e-auctions, it's not there. So this is basically saying, does the rule matter? Yes, the rule matters. People below 25,000 really choose to have short application periods, which is strange. If you want a good bid, if you want a competitive bid, you should have a longer period. Why would you choose on purpose a small period if you can? Maybe because you have a favorite, right? That shouldn't be here. Why should it be there? Everybody should want the lowest price and should therefore want a high application period. But if the contract is small enough, if the rule allows you to be short, people tend to do it. And that's already interesting. It's just a stylized fact, right? People sort away from the long application period. This is then a histogram of the reserve price and the density. And you see indeed that, again, you have this massive sorting just on this 250,000 hurdle. So it is really there. So this is just the number of auctions. I see many massive over-representation of sealed bid auctions just below the threshold. But it's not there at all with e-auctions. It's not there at all with e-auctions. So there's no fundamental reason why this 250 is something special other than the rule. Because e-auctions do not have the rule. These auctions have the rule. At the moment you have the rule, you see they massively select just under the rule to be able to have the short application period. Right? So these are, again, not proofs, but very peculiar patterns. They seem very illogical. So okay, I have no time to go into detail. I have the 3-minute sign there. So let's skip this and just show you, 1 minute. So we do a complicated regression, which is really nice. Basically what you have is long application periods give you indeed more applying firms. That's what you expect. So firms should have longer periods to get more competition and lower price, but they don't. And then let's go to the last thing. Some people pointed out, okay, all these results that the application period, if you shorten it, you get less competition. Actually, also we get higher prices then.
so it's costly. People say maybe it's urgent needs. Maybe some companies just need the gasoline right away. Maybe I'm Schoors Medicinske Pommes. I need my ambulances. I need to drive. I need gasoline tomorrow. So that's why I have this short period. It's not corruption. It's just urgent needs. Now the interesting thing is in the data, in all the contracts, you also have the moment, the date that actually it has to be delivered for the first time, and you have the auction date. So you know how urgent it is. If you split the sample. So the question is it favoritism or is it urgency? So if you split the sample in urgent and in non-urgent, you see there's a massive, for urgent guys, there's a massive sorting below the thresholds. Logically, because they want a short application, they need it fast. But sorting is also there for the non-urgent. The non-urgent guys that don't really need it fast still sort below the 250,000 hurdle that allows them to make short application periods they do not need, other than for corruption. They do not need them for urgency. So although urgency is indeed some part of the explanation, it's not the whole explanation. But do you see then? You see also, this is really cool. This is the number, this is the density over the reserve price of bids that have at least 2 applying firms. Why is this interesting? If I don't care about application periods, I'm not going to care about how many firms apply. The problem is, if not at least 2 firms apply, I'm going to have to extend the period, right? And you see that just at this hurdle, it's a massive peak in bids that had exactly two competitors. So to make sure that there's no extension, that you can keep the short period and give it to the favorite. And you also see at exactly the same hurdle, and this is very interesting, that the difference between the first bid and the second bid really drops to almost 0. So this is indication of shadow bidding. So what is going on here? You have a number of firms that want to be corrupt. What do? They make a very short application period. Nobody can apply. The problem is if only one applies, they will have to extend the period and other people will show up. So what they do is they find a shadow bidder that applies a second one that applies with them, but they have to make sure that the other one wins. So basically, since it's coordinated, this price, it's a coordinated price, you see that the difference is extremely small. So they coordinate, but in a pretty stupid way. So they say, okay, I will bid this price and you will bid just below me. So I win and we have this nice coordination. But you see it in the data. Around this threshold, a massive decrease in the difference between the winning price and the second price. There's no reason for this other than corruption. So again, this is no hard proof, but it seems to be that in Russia, the application period is something used by procurers to facilitate favoritism and corrupt behavior. And now I'm open for any questions about this stuff. Вопросы?
Thank you very much, but I have lots of questions because I worked on this market from the supplier side for 2 years because I know exactly how it works and I can say more about this list after the election. Some technical, yeah. So the first question is about you have a gas station, but for me it's the right way for corruption because if you are a public buyer, you can say in your documentation that I need, for example, free gas station in this period, no longer 10 kilometers around my building and
diameter or like
So the second one is about competition because as I know, on average it's about 1 or 2 suppliers and that's all. So, and in this case, we can more speak about collusion, not corruption, because we know each other. So it's very simple to phone and to. Yes. And actually, I'm not sure about applying period because, as for me, if I want to apply for e-action, it takes about 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours maybe, and. if application period will be longer, so for me it's a sign for corruption, because I can call, of course, and make some
The
collusion.
call doesn't take more than 5 hours. So-
But because I'm not sure we'll apply period, because to apply for reaction, it's you not need a lot of forces. So I think that is also the question of qualification of procurement employees. I know.
Okay, we should think about it. So thanks for the question and suggestions. So we should talk more about how people actually do it. That's really nice to know. You're completely right about we have observed these clauses. So they say that should be so close, or there should be a perimeter, that no more of so many kilometers, or all kinds of special clauses. Something we want to look into. However, in several of the regions, so it's not about only Lukoil and Gazprom. It's about local suppliers, and there are often many more than two. So there are always at least one or two big vertically integrated players. You could say the leader of the market, but there are often many others that can also supply. In the other paper I didn't talk about, but we're working on with Paula and Lena, is the opposite. Reserve price underpricing. What we see is that these guys, the big guys, use the opposite. They are the most efficient ones, the biggest ones. And they manipulate a very low reserve price. That is so low, they are the only ones that can still be profitable, excluding all the others. And you can show that that's a strategy that actually works for them and winning the contracts they want. So we're going to look into these guys. The last thing you said about application period is, if you're right that long application periods are positive, it's very hard to explain this. So although maybe it's true in some cases, I would say throughout the data, we observe that the legal norm to have a short application period is very strongly correlated to our best measure of shadow bidding, which is a collusion. That's the thing, right? Is it collusion or corruption? It's probably a combination. To be able to be corrupt here, you need to collude with a shadow bidder. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So people try to disentangle collusion and corruption. In reality, it's sometimes very hard. Because often, to be properly corrupt, you need another guy working with you, a competitor that colludes with you. And that's the story here, basically. So what you're saying is, longer application periods are a way to be corrupt. But the data suggests the opposite. It's clearly decreasing. So we have to think about it. Maybe there's some other way. Maybe that's there. Maybe in e-auctions or something, or for very big contracts. We didn't check that, so we should think about it. Spasibo.
I have a more general question that is not about the technical aspects of the paper. So basically there are all these complicated rules for public procurement, and they seem to be well designed, at least some of them, right? And people still find the ways. You develop better rules, people find the ways. And I suspect if you compare Russia with, say, the UK in terms of the rules, maybe they are more relaxed in the UK, and although there is some corruption in the UK, it's not comparable really, not because the rules are better, but because people just don't do this, right? They could if they wanted, but they don't. So and if you follow this logic, we need better rules, we need better institutions, you get it to the point where it becomes so complicated that even for people who don't have any corrupt intentions, just in order to get things done, you need to find a way to to do something that is not according to the rules. So I was just wondering what you think, what the solution. Maybe the solution is to relax the rules, let people do what they want to do, but in terms of enforcement, if you get caught, we make sure you die in Siberia, something like this. Yeah, I don't know.
So I like your question very much. I think it links to literature that started with Aguillon, and it's called, I think the title is Demand for Regulation. And they show that, theoretically and empirically, that in countries with more corruption and with worse institutions, you get more rules, a high demand for regulation. Because exactly what's going on in Russia. Many people try to fool the system, and the people that are restored, they start to demand more rules. Everybody wants more rules because everybody expects the other one will be corrupt. And you get, in the end, an inefficient equilibrium, where the cost of the rule maybe is higher than the gain, but still it's the equilibrium. in a theoretical and empirical sense. Then the question becomes, how do you leave that equilibrium? How do you move to a place where you have less rules and less corruption? Your suggestion was punishment, essentially. If you make sure that if you get caught, it's very bad, that would help. The problem is that will depend on the possibility to get caught. The likelihood that you get caught. You know, how will you catch these guys if there are no rules? How will you do it? So I would say in Russia, your likelihood to get caught is first of all very small and probably driven by other things. I mean, so many people have done something wrong that you only get caught if they want to get you, they want to make you get caught for some other reason. That's also, actually there's a big discussion now in China. You have the Qing, or whatever you pronounce it in Chinese, there's a big anti-corruption campaign in China. And the question is it really about fighting corruption, or is it about eradicating political opponents with the excuse of corruption? And that's the problem, I think, in autocratic countries. Your solution requires an independent way of trying to catch corrupt guys, and that probably doesn't exist. So to make your thing work, you need an institution, an anti-corruption service that works. If Russia would build that, your solution would work. If they refrain from doing that, it's not going to work, and it's going to be actually worse. It's going to just be used to improve the stability of the government. So that's the trade-off here, I think. Last question. Yes? Not quite. Oh, sorry. That was the last question. I got this signal, but we can talk about it later on. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here. And